Hey guys, tonight we're going to follow a story that begins at the top of the world where the air is thin, the sun feels closer than mercy, and a small green leaf once held the power to reshape entire empires. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing that constellation of quiet rooms across the planet, each one flickering to life as these stories travel through the night. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on a ridge high in the Andes, thousands of meters above the sea. The sky is a hard blue plate, the kind that seems to vibrate when you breathe. Your lungs ache with every inhale. But there's a sweetness in it too, a sharpness that feels almost sacred. Around you the mountains unfold like the backs of sleeping gods. Their slopes are veined with narrow terraces where lines of people move slowly, bent beneath baskets of maize, quinoa and potatoes. Among them grows something smaller, humbler, a plant that clings to life in poor soil and thin air, the coca shrub. Its leaves are smooth and shiny, shaped like the tips of hearts. When you crush one between your fingers, it releases a scent both bitter and bright, like grass laced with metal. The Quechua call it cuca, a word that hums softly in the mouth. They chew the leaves in small wads, mixing them with lime or ash to draw out the alkaloids, and within minutes their breathing steadies, their fatigue softens, and their hunger retreats to a whisper. You try it too. The taste is dry, earthy, faintly sweet at the back of the throat. Your tongue tingles. The pounding in your temples eases. You can walk again. In this thin, cruel atmosphere, the leaf is not a vice, but a prayer. The Andean people say it was a gift from the goddess Mama Cuca, born from the tears of a woman whose love was forbidden. Her body became the plant, and her spirit remained in every leaf, offering comfort to those who toil between heaven and earth. In the pre-Incan world, the leaf was already ancient. Archaeologists will one day find mummified corpses with coca leaves still tucked between their lips, green after 1,000 years. It was a companion to laborers, to shepherds, to priests who climbed into the clouds to speak to gods of sun and stone. When the empire of the Inca rose, it made coca an instrument of ritual and economy. You walk through the city of Cusco, its streets humming with ceremony. Gold catches light on temple walls, and in the courtyards priests crush leaves into bowls, mixing them with llama fat and incense before burning them as offerings. Smoke curls toward the snow peaks, carrying prayers for harvest and rain. A boy passes you with his cheek bulged by the green wad, lips stained dark like he's been kissing moss. He's heading toward the quarries where men carve stones that will fit together so tightly, no blade of grass could slip between them. They chew as they work, and the rhythm of their tools feels like a heartbeat, steady, endless. In the cool shadows of storage rooms you see woven baskets filled with dried leaves, measured and guarded like gold. The Sapa Inca, emperor and child of the sun, controls its distribution. To own coca without permission is treason. To receive it is grace. Each pouch is a token of divine favor. At dusk you join a procession that winds up a sacred hill. Women carry clay bowls filled with offerings. Men beat drums that sound like thunder slowed down. At the summit stands a priest, his cloak trembling in the wind. He holds out a handful of leaves toward the horizon, then scatters them into the air. The crowd murmurs, the leaves spin, catch the dying light, and vanish into the violet sky. For a brief moment, the mountains seem to breathe with you. You feel weightless, numb but awake. It is the first glimpse of what will later be called cocaine's paradox, clarity that numbs, stillness that hums with speed. Centuries will pass before anyone names the chemical hidden inside these leaves, but the experience is already there. Ancient, repetitive, sacred. Every chew is a dialogue between body and landscape, between exhaustion and endurance. The leaf doesn't promise joy, it promises survival. That, perhaps, is its truest seduction. Even now, walking along the mountain paths, you understand why the conquistadors will one day mistake this quiet ritual for witchcraft, because nothing so simple should wield this kind of power. The first Europeans to see coca arrive coughing and gasping, armor clattering, eyes wild from the altitude. They watch miners chew the leaves and dig for silver as if gravity itself has grown lenient. The Spaniards test the leaf, grimace, spit, then try again. One of them writes in his diary that the natives believe the plant grants strength from demons. Another notes that it keeps them alive where no Christian should live. Neither fully understands what they've found. When they conquer Cusco and claim the mines of Potosi, they nearly outlaw coca until they notice production drops without it. Suddenly, prohibition turns to taxation. The church blesses the trade, calling the leaf a necessary evil. Bags of dried green are hauled up from the valleys, packed onto llamas, carried into the darkness of the mines. Down there, beneath a mountain, the natives call Cerro Rico. The rich hill, men swing pickaxes in air that tastes of dust and iron. The walls glitter with veins of silver. The overseers count their breaths, measure their rations, and allow them leaves. Without coca, the miners faint or die. With it, they endure. You can almost hear the rhythm of their chewing, echoing through the tunnels, 1,000 tiny prayers swallowed by the mountain. Above ground, priests debate theology. Below, men trade faith for another mouthful of green. It is the first transaction of a long future. Labor for numbness, obedience for relief. Outside the mine, dusk settles over Potosi. The town glows with candlelight reflected in puddles of mercury used to purify silver. On the steps of the church, a friar blesses a procession of coca traders. He dips his fingers in holy water, traces a cross over each bag, and murmurs that all things may serve God if used rightly. You wonder if he believes it. The smell of roasted corn drifts from the market. Somewhere a woman hums a lullaby older than empire. You look at the handful of leaves still in your palm. They are small, fragile, ordinary, and yet in them you can already sense the outline of everything to come. Labor turned into profit, relief turned into craving, and a world learning to mistake numbness for grace. The night grows cold. You climb higher, the air thinning, the stars sharpening to knives. Each breath feels like pulling the sky into your lungs. You chew another leaf, feel the tingle spread across your gums, the heart quicken, the fatigue melts, replaced by a quiet exhilaration. For a moment you think this is how gods must feel, above hunger, above pain, suspended between earth and eternity. Then the wind shifts, carrying the faint sound of pickaxes from below. The illusion fades, and you realize the truth. The gift and the curse are already the same. You exhale, watching your breath become smoke in the moonlight. History is about to descend from these mountains carrying a powder that will seduce poets, generals, doctors, and dealers alike. But for now, it's just a leaf, a soft green heartbeat whispering through the Andes, waiting for the world to notice. You descend the mountain toward a city that smells of metal and smoke. The year is 1545, and Potosi has become a silver fever dream, a wound on the side of the Andes that never heals. You pass through streets carved into the mountainside, where thousands of men labor for the Empire of Spain, each carrying a pouch of coca leaves and a faith that exhaustion will not notice them. You can hear the sound of church bells colliding with the clang of pickaxes, the voice of God meeting the pulse of greed. This is where the leaf, once sacred, becomes industrial. You move through the alleys, stepping around donkeys loaded with sacks of ore. Their eyes are pale from the dust. Merchants shout prices in a mix of Spanish and Quechua. The air tastes of sulfur, and the walls are stained black with soot. Inside the taverns, soldiers drink aguardiente and talk about fortunes buried in the mountain, fortunes they'll never see. Each of them carries a story of a brother or friend who went below and did not return. They joke about it because it's the only way to survive the sound of the mountain groaning like a living thing. You visit one of the refineries. It's a grim theatre of alchemy, muddy floors, furnaces glowing like open wounds, men stirring basins of crushed rock and mercury. The overseer, a Spaniard with a gold cross hanging from his neck, chews coca too. He says it helps him stay awake through the long nights. He says it keeps the cold out. You realize that the same leaf that once sustained the enslaved now fuels their masters as well. The empire has adopted the ritual, baptizing it in silver dust and self-righteousness. From the heights of Lima to the courts of Madrid, rumors spread of this miraculous plant. Priests debate whether it is holy or heretical. Some claim it brings men closer to the divine. Others whisper that it is a devil's leaf that seduces the body. The church's verdict is pragmatic. It may be used if it serves the king, and so the trade flourishes. Ships creak under the weight of silver ingots and bags of dried coca, both treated as treasures. The ocean becomes a highway for lust, disguised as progress. Back in Europe, the leaf's legend begins to change shape. Sailors bring home stories of workers who climb mountains without rest, of miners who live on a diet of leaves and faith. Apothecaries in Seville and Antwerp sell powders labeled Peruvian remedy. Nobles sniff them for curiosity, not understanding the centuries of prayer behind each grain. You watch as the plant's identity fractures, to the Andean farmer its life, to the European merchant novelty, to the empire a tool. The mines of Potosi consume lives faster than any plague. By some accounts, 8 million souls vanish into its tunnels across 3 centuries. They say that when you walk near Cerro Rico at night, you can hear the coughs of the dead carried on the wind. Even now, centuries later, the mountain still gleams faintly in the moonlight, but its peak is lower than it once was, hollowed out by human hunger. You can't help but think that the coca leaf learned something from this, that everything sacred eventually finds itself mined. A friar named Blas Valera once wrote that the Indians find no solace but in this plant which God has provided for their misery. His words are half pity, half confession. The Spanish crown taxed coca so heavily that it became more profitable than silver in some regions. Imagine that a leaf worth more than metal, its value not in what it builds but in what it numbs. The first addiction wasn't chemical, it was economic. By the 17th century, coca plantations have spread along the valleys of Cusco, Cochabamba, and La Paz. Entire villages exist to grow, dry, and ship the leaves. Traders wear crucifixes and carry swords, but in their ledgers the sacred plant is just another commodity. They record its weight, its moisture, its price per arroba. The leaf, once chewed as an offering to the gods, is now weighed by the pound and taxed by decree. You can almost hear the rustle of parchment replacing the whisper of prayer. You spend a night in a trader's house. He tells you that coca makes men docile, that it keeps them from thinking too much. He says this as if he's reciting scripture. His children sleep beside bundles of drying leaves that perfume the room with a faint, grassy sweetness. You realize that the scent of coca is now the smell of empire, a fragrance of endurance repurposed for profit. Somewhere in the dark a mule brays, and you wonder if even the animals dream of the mountain. At dawn, you follow a caravan leaving Potosi. The mules clatter over stones, their loads swaying with sacks of ore and coca. The road curls downward into the lowlands where the air grows thick with warmth. Villages blur by, mud brick houses, children playing with reed dolls, old women sorting leaves in silence. They look up as you pass, their faces unreadable. You feel the shift. The leaf is no longer a gift between people. It's a debt carried across the Andes. Centuries pass like breaths between chews. By the 18th century, the colonial world has built its machinery of extraction. The coca leaf remains quietly indispensable, ignored by scholars but essential to survival. You stand in a Jesuit mission where a priest documents everything, the prayers, the punishments, the quantities of leaf consumed by each worker. He calls it divine accounting. He believes numbers can cleanse exploitation of sin. The Enlightenment comes with its powdered wigs and powdered faces, and Europe begins to dream of reason and science. Yet in the shadows of those dreams, the leaf still travels. It crosses oceans in jars, mislabeled, misunderstood. Scientists store it in curiosity cabinets beside dried seahorses and mummified birds. They study its form, its texture, its ability to withstand decay, but no one yet has isolated its essence, the invisible spark that makes hearts race and fatigue vanish. You can feel the story beginning to shift. The world is moving from faith to formula. The age of mysticism is giving way to chemistry. And somewhere, centuries after you first chewed the leaf on that icy ridge, a European chemist will crush, dissolve, and distill it, separating the sacred from the flesh. What emerges will no longer be called kuka. It will be named something sharper, cleaner, colder, cocaine. But before that transformation, you pause in the twilight of empire. The air over the Andes glows orange. The mountains are quiet. A single miner walks home, chewing his last leaves for the day. He spits the residue onto the ground, murmuring thanks to the goddess. The leaf has kept him alive another night. He does not know that far away, in the parlors of Europe, men in wigs and spectacles will soon speak her name without reverence. Only curiosity. You walk on, past the quarries and the fields, following the invisible trail of the plant as it leaves its homeland. It's hard not to wonder whether the leaf senses what's coming, whether it knows it's about to be reborn in a world that will strip it of myth, grind it into dust and call it modern medicine. For now, though, it remains what it always was, a whisper between breath and endurance, waiting for another kind of hunger to find it. The night settles. In the distance, you hear the faint rumble of thunder, or perhaps it's just the mountain sighing. The stars are veiled by a thin mist. You take one last look at Cerro Rico, the silver heart of a world that traded souls for metal, and then you turn toward the horizon, where ships wait with their sails like pale lungs, ready to carry the next chapter of the story across the sea. You find yourself standing inside a European apothecary sometime around the middle of the 18th century. The room smells faintly of alcohol and vinegar, the air thick with the scent of dried herbs and the soft clink of glass bottles. The shelves are lined with curiosities, powders, roots, fossils, feathers, all labeled in looping Latin script. Somewhere beneath that mountain of labels sits a small jar of pale, crumbled leaves marked simply as erythroxylon. It is a relic of empire, harvested far away by brown hands, sold in bulk through Spanish traders, and bought by men in powdered wigs who believe nature can be reduced to tinctures. You touch the glass and imagine that inside those dried fragments, a pulse still beats. The leaf has travelled farther than most people ever will. You hear the apothecary muttering to himself as he mixes something at his counter. He is grinding a dark root with a mortar and pestle, glancing occasionally at a notebook filled with smudged calculations. He is one of thousands of anonymous experimenters scattered across Enlightenment Europe, part alchemist, part doctor, part dreamer, men who spend their lives trying to measure the invisible. He doesn't know it yet, but the age of medicine is about to turn into the age of chemistry. You walk outside into a city that's learning to breathe steam. London's chimneys smear the sky grey. Paris hums with the sound of new machines. Vienna's coffee houses glow with gaslight and talk of progress. It's an age obsessed with the idea that every secret can be unlocked by reason, that God himself can be reverse engineered if you just have enough glassware. Somewhere in that fever of curiosity, the leaf from the Andes begins to stir again. In the laboratories of France and Germany, chemists take the dried coca leaf and treat it with acids, alcohols, and patience. They record their failures in thick notebooks. Bitter taste, unpleasant odor, no discernible result. Decades pass like sighs through the pages. Then, in the year 1855, a German chemist named Friedrich Gadik isolates something new from the leaf, a crystalline alkaloid that gleams faintly white. He calls it erythroxyline, but history will rename it cocaine. You can almost see the moment he holds the flask up to the light, marveling at the glint like it's frozen lightning. What he doesn't realize is that he's just stripped a god bare. The sacred plant has been dismantled, its divinity boiled off, leaving behind only its ghost in powder form. The Andean goddess Mamakuka, once honored with song and smoke, is now trapped inside a glass vial. The scientists will never know her name. They will call her molecule C17H2104. The discovery spreads quietly at first. Pharmacists experiment with it as a stimulant, a digestive aid, a cure for melancholy. Doctors prescribe it for fatigue and seasickness. In an era before antibiotics, cocaine feels like magic. It sharpens the senses, clears the fog of despair, makes the body hum with energy. A few milligrams on the tongue and suddenly the world is brighter, thoughts are clearer, and ambition burns without friction. The same numbness that once helped miners survive thin air now makes city dwellers believe they can conquer exhaustion itself. You walk through a Viennese hospital where patients lie beneath white sheets, faces pale from morphine and mercury. The doctors here have begun to mix cocaine into their experiments. One, a young ophthalmologist named Carl Culler, notices that when applied to the eye, the powder numbs sensation completely. He demonstrates it by poking his own cornea with a needle in front of stunned colleagues. No pain, no reaction. The audience erupts in applause. The medical world celebrates the first local anesthetic, and suddenly every surgeon, dentist, and physician wants a jar of the miracle dust. Soon, another Viennese doctor becomes obsessed with the same substance. His name is Sigmund Freud. You find him pacing his study, pen in hand, eyes bright with enthusiasm. He believes cocaine can cure depression, morphine addiction, even shyness. He writes essays titled Über Coca, on coca, praising its effects with almost religious zeal. He sends samples to friends, to patients, even to his fiancée, declaring that it makes conversation livelier and moods lighter. For a while, it works. Freud feels invincible. He writes more, sleeps less, dreams in sharper colors. But as with all things that burn too bright, there's a cost. Some of his friends grow ill. Others become dependent. One, a surgeon named Ernst Fleischl von Marxow, begins injecting cocaine to cure his morphine addiction. Within a year, he's lost his mind. His hands shake. His eyes dart at invisible insects. His speech dissolves into murmurs. He dies screaming of hallucinations that crawl beneath his skin. Freud retreats, quietly, never publishing his promised sequel on the harmful effects of cocaine. But the damage is done. The word has escaped into the world, gleaming like a promise written in white dust. By the late 19th century, cocaine becomes a fashion. It slips into tonics, wines, cigarettes, and chocolates. Apothecaries sell Vin Mariani, a Bordeaux infused with coca extract, endorsed by popes and presidents alike. Artists and aristocrats praise it for its clarity. Even Queen Victoria reportedly keeps a bottle of coca wine in her private quarters. The powder moves from the laboratory to the parlor, from medicine to lifestyle. It is science turned into pleasure, progress poured into a glass. You can almost hear the rhythm of that age, the hiss of gas lamps, the rattle of carriage wheels, the murmur of salons where people debate art and empire between sips of spiked wine. In their pockets, small tins of powder gleam like secrets. No one thinks of miners or mountains. No one remembers the goddess or the prayers burned at dusk. The leaf's ghost has found a new body, and it's dressed in velvet and ambition. In America, the enthusiasm crosses the Atlantic like a contagious song. Pharmacists in New York and New Orleans begin adding coca extract to tonics, advertised as nerve restorers. One such product, Coca-Cola, starts as a headache remedy infused with both coca and cola nut. A glass of it can lift the spirits, ease digestion, and give vital energy. People drink it in soda fountains without realizing they're sipping on a chemical cousin of anesthesia. It's sweet, fizzy, and legal. The world is in love with a molecule. You step into one of those soda parlors. The place glows with mirrors and brass. Patrons laugh as they clink glasses, toasting to progress. On the walls hang posters of cherubs offering coca tonics to the weary. A pianist plays something light and forgettable. The future feels effortless. Nobody knows yet that this sweetness has teeth. Meanwhile, in laboratories, chemists are refining the process. They learn to crystallize cocaine hydrochloride, purer and more potent than anything before. The powder becomes whiter, finer, colder to the touch. It can now be snorted, smoked, or injected. The boundaries between medical and recreational blur. The world is chewing the same leaf again, only faster, harder, and without the blessing of the mountains. It's strange, you think, how progress always carries the same heartbeat as greed. The empire that once mined silver now mines sensation. Cocaine becomes the spirit of the industrial age, fast, efficient, merciless. It keeps factory workers awake, soldiers alert, artists inspired, and somewhere in the quiet corners of Vienna, an aging Freud sits alone, realizing that the same powder that once made him feel godlike has become a plague among his patients. He no longer praises it, but he doesn't condemn it either. He just calls it what it is, a temptation of the nerves. Outside, the century is turning. The lamps flicker, the streets hum with invention. You walk past a shop window where a poster declares, "Coca, the elixir of life." Behind the glass, a young clerk arranges bottles with careful pride, unaware that he's participating in the earliest chapters of addiction as industry. You pause for a moment, watching the reflection of gaslight shimmer over the bottles. The color is perfect, pure, clean, inviting, the kind of purity that only exists before ruin. You step away, the echo of laughter following you down the cobbled street. Above, the stars are dimmed by smoke. Somewhere far behind you in the Andes, the coca leaves still grow quietly in the wind, unbothered by empires or theories. But here, in the laboratories and parlors of the West, their essence has been captured, commodified, and unleashed. The world is awake now, humming with a kind of artificial light that never goes out. Vienna, at the turn of the century, smells of coal, ink, and confidence. The empire's brass bands echo across the cobblestone courtyards, and every cafe seems to promise some new discovery: art, love, or chemical transcendence. You're walking down Berggasse, where Sigmund Freud still keeps his consulting room, though the gold lettering on the window is beginning to fade. Inside, the room hums with the quiet rhythm of a ticking clock and the faint sweetness of cigar smoke. He sits in a worn armchair, pen in hand, his mind a whirl of ambition and self-doubt. The cocaine that once made him feel limitless now sits forgotten in a drawer, buried beneath patient notes. He doesn't touch it anymore, but you can see its ghost in the way he moves, the nervous tapping of fingers, the quick flashes of euphoria that collapse into melancholy. Freud is no longer writing about the wonders of cocaine. Instead, he's writing about dreams and repression, about the ways people lie to themselves just to survive. But beneath those ideas lingers the same fascination, the need to understand pleasure and pain, to map them like geography. Cocaine was his first map, a brief glimpse of a continent made of desire. He never quite forgave himself for believing in it. You can feel that guilt clinging to the furniture like dust. Outside, the city moves faster than ever. Trains scream across iron bridges, telegraphs buzz with urgency, and factories belch ambition into the sky. Modernity has arrived like an endless inhale. Cocaine, too, has found its rhythm here, used by writers to stay awake, by students to memorize, by aristocrats to feel young, by soldiers to stay alert. The same white powder that once numbed the eyes of patients now sharpens the hearts of nations. You wander into a pharmacy near the university. Behind the counter, shelves of brown bottles gleam like amber honey in the lamplight. The pharmacist tells you that demand for coca tonics has never been higher. He sells powders, lozenges, and invigorating wines. He boasts that even doctors order from him in secret. People want to feel awake, he says. Not alive, just awake. You can hear how modern exhaustion has replaced ancient hunger. In America, the enthusiasm becomes a movement. The late 19th century is obsessed with self-improvement. There are tonics for vigor, syrups for melancholy, and elixirs for everything that can't be named. Cocaine becomes a democratic luxury, the stimulant of both millionaires and factory clerks. Advertisements promise instant strength and clarity of thought. One bottle shows a smiling woman offering a spoonful of syrup to a cherubic child. No one questions it. You stand in a chemist's laboratory in New Jersey, watching glass tubes hiss and bubble. The walls are lined with handwritten labels: quinine, morphine, coca. There's a sense of faith here, the kind that belongs to men who believe science can solve sin. You watch a young assistant dissolve the leaves in alcohol, filter them through gauze and evaporate the mixture, until only fine crystals remain. They look pure enough to trust, bright enough to worship. He scoops them into paper packets, each stamped with a neat black label. Cocaine hydrochloride, 1 grain per dose. He hums as he works, unaware that he's sealing the future into envelopes. By the time the 20th century dawns, cocaine has become both invisible and omnipresent. It laces drinks, cigarettes, and chewing gums. It's handed out to soldiers in the First World War to keep them marching through mud and artillery fire. It's sprinkled in the medicine cabinets of opera singers and politicians. No one thinks of it as dangerous yet. The newspapers call it the wakeful powder, a marvel of modern medicine. For a moment, the world believes it has found the cure for fatigue itself. But fatigue has a way of fighting back. You see it first in the corners of bars, in the eyes of artists who stay up too long, in the trembling hands of the workers who can't sleep. Even after the shift ends, cocaine makes them fast. Yes, but it also makes them hollow. It devours what it gives. And yet, the hunger for it keeps growing. The same civilization that conquered the oceans can't seem to conquer its own need to feel more alive than it is. One night in Paris, you find yourself in a music hall lit by chandeliers and cigarette smoke. The stage vibrates with laughter. But in the dressing rooms backstage, the performers lean over mirrors dusted with white lines. They inhale quietly, as if performing a private ritual. Their reflections shimmer with energy, their pupils wide like black moons. They step onto the stage radiant and electric, unaware that the radiance will burn through them in a few short years. The crowd cheers, the champagne flows, and somewhere in the balcony, a journalist scribbles that this must be what the future feels like. The future indeed arrives, with all its speed and collapse. By the 1920s, governments begin to notice the cracks in their golden age. Hospitals report cases of cocaine mania. Psychiatrists describe hallucinations, paranoia, violent tremors. In America, the first laws regulating narcotics appear. The Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 doesn't ban cocaine outright, but it makes it a controlled substance, a word that sounds bureaucratic but means fear. The leaf that once paid taxes to a king now pays tribute to the state. Pharmacies still sell it quietly. Doctors still prescribe it for coughs and toothaches. But the whispers grow louder. Stories of ruined lives, of murders, of madness. The newspapers which once praised it, now call it the devil's dust. The pendulum has swung from miracle to menace. The pattern will repeat for centuries. Humanity invents ecstasy, worships it, fears it, then tries to erase it. Meanwhile, the Andean farmers still grow coca the way their ancestors did. The leaves are still chewed by miners, still offered to the mountains before work begins. The world above may have turned the plant into scandal, but down there nothing has changed. The same wind moves through the terraces. The same prayers rise into the sky. You realize the leaf has survived every empire, not because it's powerful, but because it's useful. Civilization doesn't destroy what it needs. It only renames it. You return to Europe in the 1930s. The world is trembling toward another war. Factories are repurposed for weapons. Chemists are drafted to design stimulants for soldiers. Cocaine's reputation has faded. replaced by newer drugs like amphetamine, faster, cheaper, easier to produce. But the lineage is unmistakable. Every new stimulant carries the ghost of that Andean leaf. Every battlefield ration, every pet pill handed to a pilot is a modern echo of the miners chewing green in the dark. At this point, you might think cocaine's story is over, buried under progress and regulation. But stories like this don't end, they mutate. In the quiet years after the war, in jungles far from Vienna and Paris, the leaf begins to stir again. Farmers still harvest it, traders still smuggle it, and somewhere in a laboratory in South America, a chemist begins to extract the alkaloid, not for medicine, but for money. The next century won't worship science, it will worship speed. You stand at the edge of that transformation, watching as ships and planes replace mules and caravans. The leaf has shed its last trace of sanctity. It's no longer part of ritual or medicine, it's becoming a product, a currency of its own. You can almost feel history tightening, like the moment before a storm. Somewhere beyond the horizon, in the cities of the north, a new generation waits to inherit this powdered inheritance. They will call it glamour, then ruin, then business. But for now the world sleeps, unaware of what's coming. The lamps in Vienna flicker as you turn away from Freud's empty house. You imagine him at his desk one last time, writing about the unconscious, the hidden urges that drive humanity toward its obsessions. If he could see the century ahead, he might recognize cocaine for what it truly is, not a drug, but a mirror, a way to see the shape of our hunger. The 20th century opens like a champagne bottle, bubbling optimism, scientific triumph, and the faint hiss of something dangerous underneath. You find yourself in an American pharmacy sometime around 1910. Shelves gleam with glass jars and brass labels, cough syrup, toothache drops, nerve tonic, all spiked with something that the clerks no longer even bother to hide. Cocaine is as ordinary as aspirin, and nobody questions why everything suddenly feels so manageable, so bright. Mothers spoon it to their children for teething. Salesmen sprinkle it in soda water before long train rides. A new word hangs in the air, invigorated. It's the sound of a civilization that doesn't yet know it's addicted. You stand behind the counter watching a young pharmacist mix syrup, sugar, and coca extract into a thick brown elixir. He tells you proudly that his recipe soothes every ailment known to man. He laughs as he adds a few extra drops of extract. For flavor, he says, though he knows the real reason is habit. The label reads Dr. Blackwell's Vital Nerve Syrup, and beneath that, in small cursive, guaranteed non-narcotic. It's the century's first great lie printed in gold ink. Advertisements spread like pollen. Posters show elegant women smiling with spoons of medicine, babies sleeping peacefully, men shaking hands under the banner of progress. The fonts are ornate, the promises endless. Coca wine becomes the drink of the elite, endorsed by opera singers, inventors, and even the Pope. In the parlors of Paris, guests sip it between waltzes, unaware that every glass is another quiet pact with the same leaf that once whispered prayers in the Andes. The irony is so sharp it almost hurts. You can't civilize a god, only disguise it. The American South joins the craze with enthusiasm. Coca-Cola, still containing traces of the alkaloid, becomes a national obsession. People call it the temperance drink, because unlike alcohol, it sharpens the mind. Factory workers line up at lunch hour for a glass of fizzing euphoria. You take a sip and taste the ghost of the Andes beneath the sweetness, the same bite of clarity that once fueled miners and empires. The bubbles sting your tongue like tiny revelations. But beneath the laughter and brass band optimism, there's a shadow beginning to form. In poor neighborhoods, the same powder sold as medicine begins to circulate in purer form, traded hand to hand in back alleys. Newspapers start reporting crimes committed under its influence, wild exaggerations, often drenched in racism and moral panic. Headline writers invent monsters. Cocaine-crazed Negro kills 3, the new menace to our women. The same society that sold the powder in pharmacies now condemns it in the streets. It's not the substance that changed, it's who's using it. You walk through the slums of New Orleans around 1915. The city hums with music and sin, the smell of magnolias mixing with sewage and gin. In back rooms, jazz is being born, a rhythm that sounds like defiance itself. The musicians drink, gamble, and sometimes sniff. They say it keeps them awake through the night sets, sharpens their improvisation, keeps the beat alive. You can see it in their eyes, fever bright, hungry, ecstatic. In those smoky rooms, cocaine becomes something new again. Not medicine, not ritual, but rebellion. Upstairs, in a room no bigger than a prayer, a young man named Louis, skin shining with sweat, trumpet at his side, leans over a cracked mirror and takes a cautious breath through a rolled-up banknote. He laughs, shakes his head, and begins to play. The sound that comes out is both divine and desperate. Notes shimmer like glass, breaking, reforming, spiraling upward. The crowd cheers, oblivious to the price being paid. You realize you're witnessing the start of a new empire, one built not on silver or medicine, but on rhythm and escape. Meanwhile, the government begins its crusade. The Harrison Narcotics Act of 1914 tries to draw a line between medicine and vice, but lines are hard to hold when profits are involved. Cocaine becomes contraband, then contraband becomes business. Doctors lose their licenses for prescribing it. Pharmacies lock away their jars, but the addicts don't vanish. They just move underground. The drug that once sat politely in glass bottles now travels in brown paper bags. It's the same transformation that happens in every age. When pleasure is outlawed, someone will build an empire from it. The first traffickers are small-time chemists, smugglers working between ports in South America and the Gulf Coast. They hide shipments in crates of coffee, tobacco, even bananas. A few grams here, a few ounces there. Nothing monumental yet, just the quiet beginnings of a shadow economy. But you can feel the pulse quickening. Each time the law tightens, the street invents a new loophole. Each time the empire says, "No," the underground replies, "Watch us." By the 1920s, the jazz age is in full swing, and cocaine dances through it like a ghost in a white tuxedo. You find yourself in a Harlem club lit by red lamps and cigarette tips. The band plays something wild and sad, the kind of song that makes your chest ache with beauty. At the bar, a woman in a sequined dress laughs too loudly, her pupils wide as planets. She tells you she feels everything and nothing all at once. You believe her. The city outside is alive, but you can feel it shaking like a bridge that's been built too thin. The powder is no longer just a stimulant. It's a symbol of freedom, of decadence, of not caring. Poets call it the modern muse. Painters use it to stay awake through endless nights of creation. But there's a cost, always a cost. You see it in the morning light when the parties end and the silence returns. The same people who flew all night now stare into mirrors, hollow-eyed, whispering that they just need a little more. The leaf's whisper has become a scream. In laboratories, moral reformers scramble to invent cures. They design sedatives, then stimulants to offset the sedatives, building a pharmacological loop that mirrors the human one. Newspapers now call cocaine the enemy of civilization, conveniently forgetting who sold it to civilization in the first place. You can't help but smirk. It's history's favorite trick to market its sins as new discoveries, then burn them as heresies when the mirror gets too clear. You leave the city just before the Great Depression hits. The stock market collapses, the lights of Harlem dim, and the jazz fades into memory. Cocaine doesn't disappear, though. It just becomes quieter, more secretive. Soldiers returning from the Second World War will hear about it in whispers, longshoremen will sneak it off ships, and the underworld will nurture it like a secret child. The story is only halfway through, though no one realizes it yet. Before the century ends, this same powder will topple governments, fund militias, and carve entire mountains into scars. But for now, It's still hiding in pharmacy drawers and the lining of dance jackets, waiting for the jet age to lift it across continents. You can almost feel it breathing in its sleep. The sacred leaf has become modernity's reflection, bright, fast, and utterly insatiable. The powder doesn't care who uses it anymore. It just waits to be noticed again. You step outside into the cool night air. Somewhere far away, the Andes still hum beneath their blanket of clouds. The miners still chew the same green leaves and spit into the dirt, the wind carrying their prayers into the darkness. They'd recognize the rhythm of this story, even now. The same pulse, the same hunger, the same price. Nothing ever really changes. Only the costumes do. You wake up in a different century. The streets are wider now, the cars louder, and the sky is streaked with airplane trails instead of chimney smoke. The old world has burned twice in global wars, and in the ashes something new and restless has emerged. The year is 1965. The air smells of gasoline and revolution. In the jungles of South America, men with calloused hands are still tending to the coca shrubs, their leaves shining wet under the morning sun. They pluck them slowly, methodically, as their ancestors did, piling them into woven baskets. The difference now is where those leaves are headed. Not to priests, not to miners, not to apothecaries, but to chemists. To clandestine laboratories hidden in the green labyrinth of Colombia and Peru. Here, in the stillness of the forest, you see the new alchemists at work. They are not scholars or doctors, but desperate men wearing rubber gloves and improvised masks. They soak the leaves in kerosene, stir them in oil drums, pour in sulfuric acid stolen from mining camps. The fumes sting your eyes. The mixture thickens, then separates into layers. At the bottom of the barrel, like silt from another world, a pale paste begins to form. It is the same ghost gatic first coaxed from the leaf a century ago. Only now there are no notebooks, no Latin names, no illusions of science. The powder that once numbed the eye of a Viennese surgeon is reborn as contraband. You watch as the paste is packed into tin cans, wrapped in wax paper, hidden inside crates of coffee. Trucks haul it through mountain passes at night, headlights off, the drivers humming nervously to stay awake. On the coast, the cargo is loaded onto fishing boats bound for the United States. From there, the routes multiply like veins through Mexico, through the Caribbean, through airstrips carved into jungle clearings. The world has discovered not a new drug, but a new economy. Cocaine is no longer a curiosity, it's a currency. In Miami, 1975 feels like perpetual daylight. The beaches shimmer, the skyline gleams, and money moves faster than morality. You walk through the lobby of a hotel that smells of perfume and salt. Men in linen suits sip rum and talk in code, while women in mirrored sunglasses pretend not to listen. Everyone knows what's happening but pretends it's just business. Planes arrive from Colombia loaded not with coffee or flowers but with powder sealed in false compartments. The pilots are paid in stacks of cash so thick they measure it by weight. Miami becomes the capital of a new empire, an empire without borders or mercy. You see the first wave of traffickers rise from obscurity. They call themselves Los Empresarios, the businessmen. They wear Rolexes, drive Cadillacs, and talk about honor and family while casually ordering assassinations. Their patron saint is efficiency. In Medellin, a young man named Pablo Escobar is building an operation so vast it will soon make him richer than most governments. He is both myth and mathematician, able to calculate profit margins in blood. For every kilo that reaches Miami, 10 men die in the jungle. He doesn't lose sleep over it. You walk through the streets of Medellin in the late 1970s. The air hums with the sound of motorcycles and distant gunfire. Children play soccer beside graffiti that reads Plata o Plomo, silver or lead. You realize it's not just a slogan, it's a business model. Cocaine has turned the entire city into a ledger. You're either a profit or a loss. Wealth seeps into every crack. Mansions rise on the hills, guarded by men with machine guns. The churches stay full, the confessions are quick, the priests have learned not to ask too many questions. In the United States, the demand grows faster than supply. Hollywood glamorizes the white powder, rock stars sing about it, athletes whisper about it, stockbrokers snort it off mirrored desks between trades. It becomes the drug of the powerful, the same people who will later pass laws against it. On magazine covers, faces gleam with wealth and exhaustion, their smiles a little too wide, their nights a little too long. Cocaine has become the perfect companion to capitalism. It keeps you awake, confident, and incapable of reflection. You attend one of those Manhattan parties. The lights are dim, the laughter brittle. A woman in sequins leans close to you and says, "It's pure, straight from Colombia." She offers a line on a silver tray as if it's communion. The music pounds, the crowd moves, and for a moment you understand why everyone keeps chasing this feeling. It's control disguised as freedom. The high doesn't make you feel good, it makes you feel certain, and certainty, in this century, is priceless. Back in South America, the war has begun. The cartels grow stronger than governments, richer than banks. They buy politicians, generals, entire police departments. Airstrips multiply like scars across the rainforest. Villages are emptied, rivers run white with discarded chemicals. Farmers are paid more for coca than for any food crop. The leaf that once fed families now funds armies. The United States calls it the war on drugs. But it's not really a war, it's a business negotiation conducted with bullets. You fly over the jungle at dawn. Below, plumes of smoke rise from burning labs. Soldiers in green uniforms hack through the undergrowth, spraying herbicides from planes, trying to kill the crop at its roots. But coca is stubborn. It grows back. It always grows back. You realize that you can't bomb desire, can't legislate numbness. Every time one valley is destroyed, another blooms in its place. In the cities, the money flows faster than blood. Banks launder billions through shell accounts. Entire neighborhoods are built on cartel cash. Miami becomes a fever dream of excess, marble mansions, speedboats, champagne fountains. The locals joke that the city is held together by cocaine residue. Everyone is getting rich, even the people pretending not to notice. But behind the glamour, a different America is starting to form, one where addiction isn't elegant anymore. The high-class powder begins to trickle down. It changes hands, changes purity, changes meaning. Soon it will explode into something no one can control. You stand on a rooftop at sunset, watching the lights of Miami flicker like a constellation. Somewhere below, a deal is being made that will send another ton of white dust north. You imagine the journey through airports, highways, nightclubs, nostrils. Each grain carries a fragment of the Andes, a whisper of silver mines and sacred prayers, now twisted into profit and paranoia. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of salt and jet fuel. You realize that this story, like the leaf itself, is still evolving. It's becoming faster, cheaper, crueler. By the early 1980s, the United States will declare its warplanes will drop bombs on jungles. Politicians will give speeches about morality, and the streets will flood with a cheaper form of the same chemical. But for now, the world is still pretending that everything's under control. The dealers are still laughing, the bankers are still counting, the users are still dancing. The powder glows under the lights like something holy. And somewhere, beneath all that noise, you hear the faint, rhythmic sound of chewing, the miners of the Andes still working, still praying, still surviving. History never ends. It just changes its disguise. What began as a leaf in the clouds has become an empire made of dust. You look up at the stars, wondering if they can see the difference. The mountains once reached for heaven. Now the world snorts it through a rolled-up bill. The 80s arrive like a neon fever dream. You're standing in a downtown alley where the city smells of ozone, sweat, and money. Somewhere above you, glass towers hum with ambition, and in the alleys below, the opposite of ambition is being born. The cocaine empire that began in jungle laboratories has reached its inevitable mutation. The powder that once glittered on nightclub tables is now cooked on kitchen stoves, bubbling in greasy spoons and broken pots. You hear the hiss of chemical transformation, the sound of wealth turning into survival. They call it rock, crack, ready. It's the same substance, just faster, harsher, cheaper. The smoke rises in blue ribbons through shattered windows, curling like incense from a dying faith. You walk through a New York tenement at midnight. The walls are thin, the pipes rattle, and the air trembles with the distant echo of sirens. In one room, a mother sits on the edge of her bed, staring at a glass pipe in her hand. Her child sleeps beside her, small, quiet, untouched. For now, she inhales, eyes rolling back, and for a brief moment she feels weightless, free, forgiven. Then the high collapses into a crash so deep it could be mistaken for grief. You realize this is how civilizations fall, not with wars, but with whispers of relief that become screams. Outside, dealers move like shadows through the streets. They're barely older than the children who chase them with baseballs in the morning. They sell to survive, to eat, to belong. Crack is faster than poverty, faster than law, faster than hope. You see the first addicts shivering in doorways, their eyes blank, their hands trembling like tuning forks. The newspapers call them zombies, forgetting that it was the same society that created the conditions they're dying in. Politicians hold press conferences, wagging fingers, promising zero tolerance. Cameras flash, the crowd applauds, and the dealers keep dealing. You follow one of them, a boy named Marcus, 17 years old, wearing sneakers held together by tape. He doesn't know the chemistry of what he sells. He only knows that a $10 rock can make a man sell his shoes. He runs from corner to corner, the pockets of his hoodie jingling with coins and small plastic bags. The police chase him, beat him, release him, and chase him again. The war on drugs has no victories, only statistics. The city becomes a grid of surveillance and despair, its heartbeat measured in arrests. Meanwhile, on television, the war has its soundtrack. The president stands at a podium, holding a small bag of crack, calling it evil incarnate. The camera zooms in, the audience gasps. They cut to commercials for cars, soda, and deodorant. The contradiction is almost elegant. The same network that airs the sermon also sells the dream that created the hunger. The rhetoric is righteous, but the markets stay open. Somewhere in Washington, funding is approved for prisons, not rehabilitation centers. You realize that this isn't a war on drugs. It's a war on despair, waged with ignorance as ammunition. The streets of Los Angeles tell their own story. Graffiti blooms across walls like bruises, helicopters circle at night, and the sound of gunfire becomes a kind of weather. You walk through South Central as the air vibrates with the bass of car stereos and the cries of mothers. Children learn the language of survival before they learn how to spell their names. Crack has transformed neighborhoods into economies and economies into battlegrounds. The police roll through in armored trucks. The dealers scatter like ghosts. Every day feels like both apocalypse and routine. You duck into a smoky club, a place where the lights never stop flickering. On stage, a saxophonist plays with the desperation of someone trying to remember what joy felt like. His cheeks swell, veins stand out on his neck, his sound trembling between ecstasy and agony. The crowd sways, not dancing, but floating, caught in that suspended state between numbness and need. In his solo, you hear it all. The story of a leaf that once brought breath to miners, now stealing breath from addicts. You wonder if the goddess of coca still listens, or if she's turned away, ashamed of what her gift has become. But even in ruin, there's ingenuity. In the alleys, users learn chemistry out of necessity. They measure, mix, and refine. The same resilience that once built temples now keeps them alive another day. You talk to a man named Alonzo, who calls himself a scientist. He shows you how baking soda and heat can turn powder into crystal. This right here, he says, this is how the poor make the rich man's high. His voice carries no pride, only exhaustion. He tells you he used to dream of being a teacher. Now he sells rocks smaller than marbles. He looks at you and says, "We don't do this because we like it. We do it because the world forgot us." You believe him. In the suburbs, the same powder still sparkles on mirrors. The difference is geography. When the rich use, it's called indulgence. When the poor use, it's called crime. The hypocrisy isn't subtle, it's structural. You can see it in sentencing laws, in headlines, in the architecture of the city itself. The white powder moves quietly through penthouses. The rocks are dragged in evidence bags through the ghetto. America divides itself by the price of its addictions. Meanwhile, in Colombia, the cartels tighten their grip. Escobar's empire becomes legend. His wealth buys football teams, politicians, and entire neighborhoods. Children cheer when his convoy passes. Priests bless his mother at Sunday Mass. He funds hospitals and schools with blood money, and the people call him El Patron. He sees himself as a Robin Hood, but his generosity is just another transaction. You see his face everywhere, on murals, on news reports, on wanted posters. He's both folk hero and villain, the inevitable outcome of a system that worships profit and punishes poverty. By the late 80s, the violence has spilled across borders. Assassinations, bombings, kidnappings. The cartels have declared war on anyone who dares interrupt the flow of powder northward. In 1 week alone, judges are killed, journalists vanish, planes explode midair. The government fights back with tanks and tear gas, but it's like trying to punch fog. Cocaine money seeps into every institution. You realize that the leaf's curse has reached full bloom. It feeds not hunger, but power. You stand on a runway deep in the jungle as another plane lifts into the night. Its cargo hold is filled with packages wrapped in plastic and prayer. The pilot adjusts his headset, murmurs a quick plea to the Virgin Mary, and disappears into the clouds. For a second, the roar of the engine sounds almost like wind through Andean peaks. You remember those terraces where it all began, the farmers bending over green leaves, their faces patient, their faith unbroken. If they could see this, would they recognize it, or would they weep? The 80s fade into the 90s with a hangover of glitter and grief. The world is waking up to its own nightmare, but not fast enough. The powder keeps moving, the cities keep burning, and the myth keeps growing. Cocaine has become more than a drug. It's a mirror reflecting every human contradiction. Ambition and despair, greed and survival, divinity and decay. You take one last look at the city's skyline, glowing white under the moonlight, and realize the truth that has followed this story from the beginning. The leaf was never evil. The chemistry was never the curse. The real addiction was always power, the need to control what cannot be controlled, to feel infinite, even for a second. And for that illusion, humanity will always pay in silver, in blood, or in sleep. By the time the 90s begin, the world has grown used to the sound of distant explosions. The war on drugs is no longer a campaign. It's a weather system, a storm that never quite ends. You stand in Bogota watching soldiers with rifles patrol the streets beneath billboards for American soda and perfume. The irony is hard to miss. One culture exports powder, the other exports slogans about purity. In the air there's a smell of exhaust, rain and fear. Every taxi driver glances at the rearview mirror a little too often. Everyone knows someone who's disappeared. The cartels are no longer just businesses, they are governments unto themselves. The Medellin cartel has made war a daily ritual. You walk through neighborhoods where gunfire has replaced church bells, where children can tell the difference between the sound of an Uzi and an AK-47 before they can spell their own names. The local paper's obituary section reads like a census. Coffins are stacked in workshops once used to make furniture. You look at the mountains and realize they've been carved not only by rivers and time, but by ambition. At the same time, something is shifting. Pablo Escobar, the man who built an empire out of coca and charisma, is beginning to fall. His enemies are no longer faceless soldiers. They are other businessmen, former allies, rival cartels who want his territory. You hear about him constantly, as if he were a ghost haunting both hemispheres. One day he is the richest man alive. The next he's hiding in a safe house, speaking to his family through static-filled radios. The government calls him a terrorist. The poor still call him a saint. When he is finally found in 1993, shot on a rooftop in Medellin, the city exhales for the first time in a decade. But it's not peace that follows, just vacancy. You can almost feel the market inhaling again, ready to fill the space he left behind. In the jungle, the production continues. Smaller cartels rise from the ruins like fungi after rain, the Cali cartel, the Norte del Valle, and countless others whose names barely survive in headlines. The trade fragments but never weakens. Routes shift westward through Mexico, where traffickers learn a valuable lesson. It's not just the product that matters, but control of the highway. The Mexican cartels grow more brutal, more disciplined, less visible. They move like accountants with machetes. You cross the border at night and see trucks idling in desert silence, engines ticking, headlights off. The drivers wait for a call, for a green light that never comes, for a moment that can change the balance of an empire. In Los Angeles, the smoke has barely cleared from the riots of 1992. The streets are still cracked, the trust between people thinner than the smog. The crack epidemic lingers like a ghost no one wants to talk about. The government keeps building prisons instead of clinics. You pass graffiti that reads "No future, no fear," and beneath it, a hand-drawn halo. You remember the leaf again. The goddess turned molecule turned commodity. And you realize that this is her latest incarnation, a burned-out halo over concrete. Meanwhile, in the high offices of Washington, men in suits hold meetings about narco-terrorism. Charts and slides show numbers rising and falling, each line a heartbeat of the global trade. They speak in statistics, but outside entire nations are bleeding. Farmers are forced to choose between growing coca or starving. In Peru, planes spray defoliants that poison rivers. In Bolivia, protesters march with handfuls of green leaves, chanting that coca is life, not crime. The same leaf that once built empires now divides them. You begin to understand that the war isn't about drugs, it's about narratives. Whoever controls the story controls the money. You fly to Miami again, now older, quieter, but still pulsing with heat. The flamboyant violence of the 80s has faded into corporate polish. The cartels have evolved into networks of accountants and lawyers. Money laundering happens through offshore banks, shell corporations, and real estate. Cocaine no longer announces itself with gunfire. It hums through the economy like an electric current. You walk past skyscrapers built with laundered cash, their glass facades gleaming in the sun. Inside, executives trade stocks while their offshore accounts hum with the same energy that once funded jungle wars. The powder has become abstract, numbers, zeros, balances, but its ghost still smells faintly of kerosene and blood. In Mexico, the war picks up the rhythm again. The cartels there become multinational brands. Sinaloa, Gulf, Zetas, their soldiers post videos on early internet forums, their executions filmed like corporate ads for terror. You travel through border towns where fear has a scent, burnt rubber, gun oil, and stale beer. The streets are lined with shrines to Santa Muerte, the skeletal saint who accepts offerings from both sinners and saints. Candles flicker beneath her grin. One man tells you that she listens better than the Virgin Mary because she doesn't judge. You nod. Judgment has lost its currency here. You think back to the miners of Potosi, chewing coca to survive in the thin air. They too were trapped in a system larger than themselves. The faces change, but the equation doesn't. Labor, leaf, profit, death. The same chemistry that kept them working in the dark now fuels nations above them. You can almost hear the echo of their pickaxes beneath the hum of airplanes. In New York again, you walk past nightclubs where the powder has made a quiet comeback. Not crack this time, not the violence of the streets. Just small lines drawn on bathroom counters in sleek clubs filled with laughter. History repeats itself, but with better lighting. The rich have reclaimed their old toy. You listen to a young banker explain that it helps him stay focused. He smiles, white powder dusting the rim of his nostrils, unaware he's repeating a ritual 500 years old. You wonder if he'd believe you if you told him that the feeling he's chasing was once a prayer whispered in Quechua. Technology makes the trade invisible. Encrypted phones, dark web marketplaces, cryptocurrency. A transaction that once required an army can now be made with a text message. You sit in an internet cafe in Lima, watching a teenager message someone named El Doctor through an app with disappearing messages. In 5 minutes, a motorcycle will deliver a package to his door. No blood, no guns, just logistics. The product is the same. The delivery smoother. Modernity perfects everything except morality. You find yourself again in the Andes, the cycle returning to its beginning. The farmers still rise before dawn, still pick the same leaves, still pray to the same mountain gods. But now their prayers are mixed with exhaustion. They know the world calls them criminals, yet they can't survive without the crop. The government offers them money to grow coffee or bananas, but the soil resists. Only coca thrives here. The goddess, it seems, refuses to die. She is stubborn, like grief. One evening, as the sun sets over the valleys, an old farmer offers you a handful of fresh leaves. For the road, he says. You chew them slowly, feeling the familiar numbness creep across your tongue. It's the same calm that carried miners through their shifts, soldiers through their wars, dealers through their danger. You realize the leaf itself has never changed. It's humanity that keeps rewriting its purpose. What was once sacred, then scientific, then sinful, has come full circle. It's no longer a plant or a powder. It's a mirror reflecting everything we fear about ourselves. Our need to feel powerful, our hunger for escape, our worship of control. Night descends over the mountains. The jungle hums with insects and the faint buzz of generators from nearby labs. The stars blink like scattered coins. Somewhere, a radio crackles with static and music, an old Andean song about endurance, about wind and stone and patience. You listen, chewing the leaf, and feel the centuries collapsing into one long breath. The story of cocaine isn't over. It never will be. It's a loop, a heartbeat, a white echo that refuses to fade. The new millennium begins without fanfare in the story of cocaine. No sudden explosions, no revolution, just a quiet continuity of profit. You wake to the low hum of an airplane slicing through dawn over the Caribbean. Below you, the water is black glass. Somewhere in the cargo hold are bricks wrapped in plastic, disguised among crates of tropical fruit. The pilots fly in silence, eyes fixed on the horizon, the way their grandfathers once steered ships across the same route. History has gone digital, but smuggling remains analog muscle, risk, faith. You land in Miami again. Only this time the city has changed costumes. The pastel glamour of the 80s is gone. Now everything is glass, chrome, and credit. Money doesn't smell like sweat anymore. It smells like disinfectant and new cars. The cartels have diversified. They own construction firms, ports, even nightclubs that launder money faster than the tide. You walk through a marina lined with yachts that gleam under halogen lights, each one a floating monument to denial. The powder is still here. It just wears a suit now. Yet far from the coast, another form of cocaine is mutating again. In the neighborhoods abandoned by wealth, the powder has turned back into rock, smaller, harsher, more desperate. You walk through a part of Baltimore where the streetlights flicker and the houses look half asleep. On the corners, dealers in oversized hoodies call softly to passers-by like priests inviting confession. Their voices are low, their hands quick. The product is cheaper now, but the cost is the same. Time, teeth, trust. A generation raised on dreams of fame and freedom now fights over tiny white pebbles in alleys that smell of rain and rot. You enter an abandoned building where smoke lingers in the air like memory. A woman crouches beside a candle, her fingers shaking as she lights her pipe. The flame reflects in her eyes, small, desperate stars. When she inhales, her body stills, her breathing slows, and for a moment she looks peaceful. Then it hits her like a tidal wave. The rush, the forgetting. Her eyes roll back. Her mouth opens in a silent prayer. You've seen this before. In the mines, in the clubs, in the labs. The same posture, the same surrender. It's almost holy if you ignore the broken glass on the floor. Governments keep declaring victory in the war on drugs. Every few years, a new politician stands at a podium and announces record seizures, new initiatives, international cooperation. But when you visit the prisons, you see the real trophies, rows of young men in orange jumpsuits, their lives measured in mandatory sentences. Most of them were arrested for possession, not power. You ask a guard how many dealers he thinks are in here, and he laughs. None, he says, just customers. The real traffickers, the ones who ship by ton and live behind gates, rarely see the inside of a cell. The system works exactly as intended. It punishes need and protects greed. In Colombia, the coca fields stretch farther than ever. Satellite images show the green glow of cultivation creeping back after every eradication campaign. Planes spray herbicides over valleys where children play, villagers cough, crops wither, rivers choke. The farmers don't call it the war on drugs. They call it the war on the poor. You meet one named Don Aurelio, his skin the color of weathered soil. He says he used to grow maize and coffee, but the market collapsed. Now he grows coca. It's not pride, he tells you. It's survival. He plucks a leaf and hands it to you. This plant never lies. The world does. You chew the leaf, feeling the same bitter sting you felt on the Andean ridge centuries ago. It numbs your tongue, clears your head, and fills you with a strange mix of calm and purpose that has kept humanity coming back to it again and again. You realize the irony: the more civilized the world becomes, the more it needs primitive comforts. Cocaine, like faith, has adapted to every era. It doesn't die, it rebrands. In the early 2000s, cocaine finds a new stage, the club scene. The lighting is darker now, the music louder, the nights longer. In cities like London, Berlin, and Tokyo, young professionals with immaculate hairlines and fragile confidence gather in underground bars. They talk about stocks, art, and existential dread while passing around small bags with practiced discretion. It's not rebellion anymore, it's routine. They tell themselves it's harmless, that they're functioning, that it's better than alcohol. You watch them dance, their faces gleaming with sweat and pretense, and realize they're still chasing the same thing everyone always has: relief from the unbearable honesty of being awake. Technology has made everything faster, even the descent. You scroll through forums where users share tips on purity tests, suppliers, recovery. They speak with the detached intimacy of confessionals, bound together by algorithms instead of empathy. The trade has moved online. The priesthood of addiction now communicates in emojis and pseudonyms. You can order cocaine with the same ease as pizza, delivered to your doorstep by a courier who smiles politely and never asks questions. The ritual has become domestic. The goddess has learned to use GPS. In Mexico, the cartels fragment into hydra-headed chaos. For every leader arrested, 2 more emerge. Entire towns vanish overnight, swallowed by violence. Journalists who report on the trade are silenced, sometimes literally buried beneath the stories they tried to tell. You visit a roadside shrine where a bouquet of marigolds has been left for a murdered reporter. The wind flutters the pages of her last notebook. She had written, "The truth is not profitable." You close it gently. In Europe, smugglers shift tactics. Cocaine arrives hidden in frozen fish, in pallets of fruit, in the walls of cargo ships. Authorities seize tons each year, and yet the price on the street never rises. That's the cruel math of the trade. Supply is infinite because despair is infinite. You stand on a dock in Rotterdam as customs officers open a container that smells faintly of lime and ammonia. Inside are blocks of cocaine wrapped in layers of foil, stamped with brand logos like luxury goods. Even crime has learned marketing. At the same time, scientists begin studying cocaine's effects on the brain in greater depth. MRI scans show the circuitry of reward lighting up like fireworks, the same patterns seen in gambling, love, and worship. It's a chemical portrait of human longing, a glimpse of what happens when the promise of paradise can be snorted. You watch the monitors and think about all those who chased that flicker across centuries. Empires, explorers, doctors, addicts. They were all mapping the same craving. You find yourself again in a quiet city park at night. The air smells of rain. The trees are slick with it. Somewhere nearby, a young man sits on a bench, head tilted back, nostrils burning. He stares up at the sky, waiting for something to happen. A moment later, he laughs softly, a sound more weary than joyful. He doesn't know it, but he's part of a continuum stretching back 5,000 years, from the shepherds of the Andes to Freud's parlor to Escobar's jet. You sit beside him and say nothing. The world hums quietly around you, lights flickering like dying stars. And there, in the stillness, you realize that the story of cocaine isn't just about a drug. It's about the eternal human attempt to edit reality, to make it sharper, gentler, faster, kinder, or at least bearable. Every civilization has its leaf, its powder, its potion. Cocaine is just ours, distilled into dust, polished by guilt, sanctified by commerce. You look at the sleeping city, its veins glowing with traffic and electricity, and think, maybe this is the real addiction, the belief that we can outpace our own emptiness. It's the present now, an age of endless scrolling, sleepless cities, and invisible highs. You sit in your room, light from the screen washing over your face, reading about seizures measured in metric tons and new record busts that barely dent the market. You scroll further and find videos of men in ski masks posing with gold-plated rifles, their captions half threat, half advertisement. The comments are in every language. The story of cocaine, once confined to mountains and jungles, now belongs to the entire planet. There isn't a continent untouched by it. From the port of Antwerp to the streets of Johannesburg, from Manila's alleys to New York's boardrooms, the white dust travels as if it has a passport stamped by every empire it ever corrupted. You walk through an airport, where the walls hum with soft music meant to calm travelers. Customs officers watch with expressionless eyes as bags pass through scanners. Somewhere inside one of them lies a kilogram of compressed leaf ghost, worth its weight in human stories. The scanners can detect the outline, but not the truth that this powder carries centuries of prayer, greed, and grief in each molecule. It is not contraband, it's a biography. Each grain tells of miners and chemists, of priests and kings, of addicts and mothers, of wars declared and lost. The conveyor belt hums on, indifferent. Outside, the world moves faster. A dealer takes orders through encrypted apps, using emojis instead of words. Delivery drivers carry packages between luxury condos as if they were delivering food. In London, young bankers in tailored suits share lines in the bathroom before negotiating billion-dollar mergers. In Sao Paulo, kids in favelas sell micro bags stamped with designer logos for the equivalent of lunch money. In every city, the language of transaction sounds the same. The whisper of bills, the click of a lighter, the sharp inhale. You realize that the leaf's spirit has completed its metamorphosis. It no longer belongs to religion or science or rebellion. It belongs to routine. And yet, in places far from the neon, the old rituals persist. In the high valleys of Bolivia, you find an old woman sorting coca leaves on a woven mat. Her hands move with quiet grace, separating the green from the broken. She chews a few as she works, eyes squinting against the sun. She doesn't call it cocaine, or commodity, or vice. To her, it's still sacred, a way to speak to the mountains, to ease hunger, to share breath with the divine. You watch her and realize that time never really killed the goddess. It just translated her into languages she never asked for. Meanwhile, back in the global north, scientists in white coats study cocaine under microscopes and scanners, measuring its half-life, its neurological pathways, its correlation to dopamine spikes. They publish papers about addiction, about behavioral economics, about public health. But what they rarely write about is longing, the silent gravitational force that has always pulled humans toward things that numb and illuminate in equal measure. You think of Freud, of Gadik, of the miners of Potosi, and how each in their own way was chasing the same quiet spark. Science can explain what cocaine does to the brain, but not what emptiness does to the soul. The governments keep fighting, the drugs keep winning. In Mexico, the war has become generational. Entire towns live between cartels and soldiers, both claiming to bring order, neither delivering it. The children who once played soccer in dusty streets now join militias before they can vote. You walk past a school where bullet holes pockmark the walls. The teacher still rings the bell every morning. The courage feels biblical. Elsewhere, in European ports, customs agents open containers filled with bananas, only to find hundreds of kilos of powder hidden behind false walls. In the news, officials stand proudly beside the confiscated bricks, wrapped tight in plastic, posing for photographs as if the war were winnable. The cameras flash, the drugs are burned, the market adjusts by sunrise. You can't help but notice the absurd symmetry. The leaf, once burned in temples as an offering, now burned in evidence pyres as a warning. Fire has always been our way of pretending we have control. Cocaine's modern face is paradoxical. It is both luxury and poverty, celebration and collapse. You watch a music video where a rapper tosses white powder like confetti, while lyrics praise money and survival. You switch channels and see a documentary about overdose deaths. The same substance dances between glamour and tragedy, switching masks faster than you can keep up. It has learned the algorithm of human contradiction. And yet, in quieter corners, something else begins to stir. Understanding. There are harm reduction clinics now, safe use centers, rehabilitation programs that treat addiction not as sin but as symptom. You visit one in Vancouver. Inside, the walls are painted a calm shade of blue, the air thick with coffee and disinfectant. Volunteers move quietly, offering clean needles, warmth and words without judgment. A man sits in a chair, tears drying on his cheeks, telling a nurse that he just wants to stop feeling like a ghost. She listens, truly listens, and for a moment the entire machinery of history, the empires, the wars, the greed feels distant. It's just two people, trying to find their way back to being human. Outside, night falls. You walk along the harbour where the city lights shimmer on the water. Each reflection looks like a fallen star trembling on the surface before fading. You realize that this story was never really about cocaine at all. It was about what people do when the world asks too much of them. How we seek shortcuts to peace. How we mistake numbness for salvation. How we keep climbing mountains even when there's nothing left at the top. The wind shifts, carrying a faint, sweet scent, green, herbal, familiar. You close your eyes and imagine the high Andes again. The air is thin, the sky wide, the mountains eternal. You chew a leaf, feel the numbness spread across your tongue, the clarity that isn't quite joy but something close. The leaf doesn't judge. It never did. It simply offers endurance. And in a world addicted to speed, endurance might be the last sacred thing we have left. You exhale, and the breath feels ancient. Across centuries, across continents, from temple smoke to subway stations, from silver mines to skyscrapers, the same story keeps whispering the same truth that every civilization builds its paradise on a foundation of forgetting. The leaf only gave us the means. The forgetting was always ours. The story slows now, like smoke curling in its last trace before fading. You sit with it in the dark, not as a historian anymore, but as a quiet witness to the long echo of human wanting. The world outside your window hums faintly, distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere, a siren that never seems to stop, and in that hum, you can almost hear the same rhythm that's followed you through these centuries. The heartbeat of a species forever trying to outpace its own shadow. You think of the leaf again, soft and green, trembling in the thin air of the Andes. Long before chemists and kings, before soldiers and smugglers, before laboratories and headlines, it was just a plant offering comfort to breathless travelers. You imagine the first hand that plucked it, the first tongue that tasted its bitterness, the first prayer whispered as it took effect. They didn't call it divine, they just called it necessary. And maybe that's what all of this has been about, from empires to epidemics. The long, clumsy search for necessity, for something that makes being alive a little more bearable. The mountains are quiet now. Their silhouettes fade into the sky like old ink bleeding through paper. Somewhere beneath them the miners still chew, the fields still sway, the world still turns. Above them the clouds drift like unspooled cotton, white as the powder that once promised transcendence. You can almost smell the cold wind again, thin, metallic, eternal. Let the sound of it soften you. Let the history blur at the edges until it feels less like tragedy and more like understanding. The leaf, the powder, the empire, the addict, they all dissolve into the same simple truth that every age invents its own kind of forgetting, and that remembering it softly might be the closest thing we have to peace. You breathe out slowly. The hum of the fan becomes the wind across the mountains. The glow of your screen becomes the fading light behind a ridge at dusk. You close your eyes, and for a brief moment there's nothing but stillness. The story has ended, but the silence it leaves behind feels like a kind of mercy. Sweet dreams.